What's up, guys? Welcome to RetroRGB Road Trip number 2 with Kevtris. Hey guys, I am here with Kevtris live in person. This is the RetroRGB Road Trip number 2 and the other side of the screen. Usually I'm staring at you, staring at your monitor here.
Minimize everything.
Hide all your top secret info.
Yeah, I already did that.
Yeah, we all know the truth. We all know you're working on the Coleco Chameleon.
You mean the Atari POS?
Yes, absolutely. So what's up, dude? Thank you very much for allowing me to come in here and invade your space. It's been really neat. So far, I visited Jason. I got other people on the list. It's so much cooler to see somebody in their element, you know? You've done a lot of amazing work, and just wanted to pick your brain a little bit more than the last couple times, I guess. So obviously I got to start with the Super NT, because holy crap is that thing awesome. Last time I talked to you, it was before a lot of things could go public, so you couldn't really talk about too much, but do you want to give us a rundown of what that was like? I mean, we know you jammed, probably a year's worth of work into 6 months.
Yeah, something like that.
I guess as an overview and a refresher, what was that like? I mean, did you really have to go through crazy pains to get everything out of that, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was working, I have a day job, and then I come home and take a nap and then get up and work on the Super NT all day or all night and then go to sleep and then do it again.
Jeez. That's going to wear on you, though, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You need time to recover.
Yeah, well, I don't have time to recover. It's right on to the next project.
I know the feeling, and I love it, because sometimes I burn out and I like to take a little vacation, but I'm happiest when I'm doing something that's enjoyable. And then one day you wake up and it's not.
Yeah.
But then you gotta just power through it, take your break, and get back to it. But
it's no longer fun when you have a deadline.
Yeah. Yeah, but without confines, you don't get your most creative. I just murdered that quote. That was an Albert Einstein quote that I just heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say again the other day, and I messed both of their versions up, but I think you get the point. For the Super NT, I tested that thing a lot, played a lot of games on it. And I'm usually the one that finds any of the weird visual things on it. I don't know why. I'm kind of colorblind, but I see sharpness really well. Must be one of those, like, you lose one sense, you gain the other. And I thought it was just absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, any insight on how you got the video that sharp and that perfect?
Well, I was developing it by using a real PPU.
So it's
Actually, I should rephrase. I should not say the word.
Oh, the company.
System. Oh, you can say it, but I shouldn't really say it.
Oh, fair enough. Maybe I'll like bleep so it looks like you're swearing. But so basically, with I know there's always the debate of hardware simulation versus emulation, but a very quick layman's term, an FPGA could emulate the exact way a chip works, not an entire system. So when you properly recreate the way a chip works, it's a one-to-one recreation of it.
Yeah, pretty much. It should be, if it's accurate.
If it's accurate. Now that's the key right there. So your cores seem to be pretty crazy accurate. And I mean, as simple as oversimplifying as I'm making it, it's really just what it comes down to, making the cores as accurate to the original chips as possible.
Yes. Well, I did direct hardware compare in real time of the real chips versus my FPGA of it.
So did you have like a Super Nintendo running hooked up to a TV, and then yours running as well to kind of see while you were going, or probably?
No, I made custom hardware that has the system chips on it, and it plugs in, and then I can run them both in parallel directly at the same time. A one-to-one compare. So
you took the Super Nintendo chips off the board and put it onto your custom board so that you could run it through.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's such a cool way of doing things. And did you just use like an HDMI logic analyzer, or did you use all of your own custom equipment?
No, it's all my own custom stuff. This is in the system. This is an HDMI, so HDMI is blast.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, it was a pretty stupid thing to say. But so now that the project's kind of come to an end, there's obviously a lot of testing going on. It works great with the ROM carts that I've been using. I'm obviously a huge fan of the SD to SNES. The analog pass-through works great, so you get Super Game Boy and the MSU games. I can't think of any feature other than implementing like the SD to SNES into it. Is there any feature looking back that you would have changed on it? Or
no, I think it's pretty much came out exactly how I wanted it. It's pretty perfect, I think.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with that. Any of the settings of the menus, the way they're programmed, once you get used to it, it's very easy. But have you ever thought of adding some pre-programmed settings to it? Like, so you can go in and have Super Game Boy Fill, Super Game Boy Stretched, or any of the other stuff? And
yeah, I thought about it. I don't have time to add it. I'm so busy with everything that, I have to, take my time on what I have to do, and, I can't, I don't know how to explain it.
You have to use your time wisely. You can't just...
Yeah, I have to portion my time into, adding features that, people want, what I can do easily. If something's going to take a lot of time or effort, I don't have the time to do it. If I was just working on this one product for 5 years, I could add every single little thing and, that anybody could ever want and then some, but I don't have time to do that. I got to work on the next project.
Right. And what is it entailed when you add things like a menu update? Because for me, who never did Verilog programming and doesn't know anything about this, it seems like at least adding a menu setting would be easier than adding a new chip support or something. Is it, a day's worth of work and testing?
It just depends on what the feature is.
Mm-hmm.
The menu part's fairly easy. There's hardware on the back end and software on the menu.
Okay.
And then there's lots of testing. The testing sometimes takes more than actually adding it.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure it doesn't conflict. So if you have this new feature on and these other features, is it going to have a problem? But yeah, couldn't be happier with the reception, basically. Everyone's been really happy. It sold well, and what else can you say?
Yeah, exactly. Now, the Analogue Twitter account teased an RGB output board, so that's obviously public knowledge. Is that something that you can comment at all? Is there going to be a target release date?
I don't know. I can't comment, really.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't comment on that.
Now, I assume that decision was really just made to save cost, right? So it would make sense, because if you have whatever the board costs, let's say $50, to add that onto the Super NT, that adds $50 to every board, and not everybody's going to want it. I think even people that love RGB setups might have one just sitting on their flat screen. So it makes sense to separate a board, and I hope the Analogue Twitter account gives us more than a cryptic text every 6 months, but I'll be paying attention for that. What about all the other projects you've worked on in the past? I couldn't stop talking about the Analogue NT Mini. I thought that was pretty miraculous for all the things that it did, and obviously the high def NES.
Yeah.
Whenever time allows, at some point in your hobby future, if you have that, or assuming you don't just take one insane project after another, were there anything else that you wanted to go back and add to any of those, or were you pretty much? No one's ever 100% happy with their work. But,
well, yeah, there's tons of things I wanted to fix and add. I still need the Intellivision core on the NT Mini. That's fully done and finished and working, but it just didn't have time to add it in there.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I always ask you about, and I guess that's probably the fourth time I'm asking, and I'm hoping for a different answer this time, is do you ever consider just doing direct bit-for-bit output over HDMI? So whatever the original signal is, just spit it out, knowing that it's probably not compatible with TVs.
You could theoretically do it, but, at this point, I don't have the time to add that.
I hope that's something you keep in the back of your mind for the future, because of all the talk of potential 4K and then 8K scalers, holographic scalers 20 years from now, whenever we have 3D boxes in our living room. The one thing that I definitely saw over the years, especially with scaling, is being able to have a one-to-one digital bit-for-bit output of something, manipulating that image always seems to be in the long run better than manipulating whatever else came afterwards. Mm-hmm. So going 1080p to 4K, I don't think anybody on the planet would notice the difference. But 8K, 10K, whatever comes next, that might be. I guess I'm always thinking of future proofing. Mm-hmm. But anything Out of all the stuff that you've made, though, I mean, those three that I named were pretty crazy. Was there any other things that you've been working on that you have in the future? Any hobby projects, not licensed projects?
No, not really. Nothing.
None of the audio stuff that you were working on or anything?
No, not really. I mean, I got the synthesizer, but that's who knows when. That's 2 or 3 years out at least.
Yeah, you've been working on that for a while, though, right?
Well, I have like 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, I think the first time I talked to you was you showed one revision of it. Your audio conversions. So I had gone back and rechecked your website a couple times and really listened to some of those where you took NES audio and converted it to Atari 2600.
Yeah.
Are there tools out there that people could use to mess with this stuff themselves?
The NT Mini does that.
You could actually switch it from.
Yeah, it's right in the NT Mini in the audio menu.
Is that the NSF player? Or is that...
Well, it'll do it in the NSF player, but it's in the audio menu. It's already in there. If you have an NT Mini, it already does it.
Oh, that's one of the features that I probably just didn't understand how to use. I was also thinking for more along the lines of people who make their own music. So people that program in their own MIDI soundtracks. Even musicians I know that play in live bands, guitar, bass, a lot of them will program their stuff into like Guitar Pro, which essentially just MIDI. Is there software out there that you could put it through and convert it to a format? So even in the Analogue NT Mini, you could play your own recordings, what it would sound like on an Atari, on an NES, on a...
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to make it into an NSF. If you could make it into an NSF, you could play it.
That's something I have to look into. I think that'd be pretty
sure
amazing.
there's lots of NSF trackers, so if you know a tracker, you can do it in that.
That's definitely something I want to look into. When I work on my next album, I'd love to put everything in MIDI and then have like a Sega Genesis version of my music. I think I might cry. Get to plug it in and play it on the console I played on as a kid while I was learning how to play guitar. So you have here a lot of very fun toys. Is there any ones that you wanted to talk about specifically? Do you want to talk a little bit? I got footage that I'll play over this, but do you want to talk a little bit about that magnetic flip thing?
Oh, the flip dots?
Flip dots.
Yeah, what about it?
What is it?
It was like a bus sign, you know, to tell you which street the bus was going to stop at, I guess. Yeah, they were on the fronts and back of buses.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what they used it for.
And you reprogrammed it?
Well, yeah, it didn't have anything on it. I made a controller board for it.
So you actually designed a controller board for something that you found like that?
I got it on eBay.
On eBay?
Yeah, I bought it on eBay. I always wanted one. I was curious how they worked. So. Yeah.
How did you figure out how to write a controller for it?
Well, I figured out how it worked and then made a controller.
I hate it when you say things like that because you say it like, Bob, I just figured it out. Why don't you go figure it out? I wouldn't even know where to begin. Do you
you can show B-roll of it. Here's the controller.
Yeah, so is it just an interface with, so every pin has an electrical on-off switch and you just probed around to figure it out? Is it...
Well, I had to figure out how the flip dot controller works. I mean, it's not that difficult. There's like a little coil for each dot. And then there's diodes and they're in a matrix, like an XY matrix. So I figured the pin out using a multimeter and the power supply. You know, I could flip the dots with the power supply. Then I designed a circuit board to drive it.
That's pretty incredible.
And that's the circuit board, so.
Well, I thought that thing was very cool. What about...
I want to do Pong on it.
Oh, I would love that. Or a Snake game. That would work fine, too.
Talk about the Snake game.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Do you think... I mean, that sounds like something if you made a kit of. I know a ton of people that would have that just for the hell of it. Just for some very cool creation.
Where would you get the flip dot controller, though? You'd have to find that same one on eBay.
One on eBay, yeah.
I've seen them for sale on eBay. That's where I got it. I've seen other, the same model I have being sold on eBay.
What brought you to the place where you looked for a flip dot controller?
Well, I've always wanted one, so I was like, oh, I'm just going to search eBay for it. I saw it somewhere, and I've always wanted to know how they worked. Right.
So you just figured, let's see if they have one on eBay?
Yeah, and I found it on eBay. Someone sold 2 of them. It was like $100 or something. I was like, oh, that's cheap enough.
I found tons of stuff that way, but I've also found stuff like I searched for one thing, spelled it wrong, and I saw another thing. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know I could buy one of those. Next thing you know, I have a pile of junk at my house. But what about the thing that looks like like a Frankenstein tube amplifier?
Oh yeah, the Nixie or that's a Decatron clock, yeah.
So I'll get footage of that after, but what exactly is that?
Well, Decatrons were counting tubes. This is how you counted electronically before transistors were a thing. Because, you wanted to count pulses, so those Decatron tubes are a way to count pulses. So you would have like a 6-digit counter, you'd have 4 Decatrons for the fast counting, and then a mechanical counter for the last 2 digits, or whatever. You could count up to, 5 or 10 kilohertz, which isn't that fast, but back then, I mean, that's pretty much all you had. And you were vastly limited, so that was how you counted electronically. And it's neon-filled tube and a glow steps in a circle. There's 10 positions, so.
Well, I had some random questions for you that maybe I'll cut out, maybe I won't. I just I don't even know if they'd apply to anything else. But one of the things I've been working on was just different ways to do lag testing. So our Artemio worked with me to do a custom version of his lag test on the 240p suite, and I had an LED wired into a controller to try to take. I had a 1,000 frame per second camera. So I was able to do that to count exactly how long it would take from the time the light came on until that. That was pretty neat. It's very hard on CRTs because you have to do it so many times until you get lucky and have the light wave come down across where it is. Have you ever thought of programming anything into that to like the Super NT? So the LED light in the front goes off when you press a button versus on the screen?
Well, I thought about making a cartridge with a light sensor on it. And you would plug it into your system. You could make a model for whatever system you wanted. And then you held it up to the screen, and it would tell you the lag in milliseconds right on the screen.
Whoa, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's lag test devices out there, but the one thing that I always try to do, and I'm sure not everybody's weird like me, but when I test the TV, I want to test its lag, but I also want to test the compatibility with Super Nintendo, both through the HD Retrovision cables for people that just want to use component, for all TVs that still have component, and I want to test it through the open source scan converter. So to be able to do all of that in one is why I've been trying to use the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Is there a limitation for how fast, and this might be a very dumb question, but is there a limitation for how fast the Super Nintendo can count on screen? So if there was like a millisecond, microsecond timer?
I would probably do it with some hardware, and it could count clock pulses. So there's 21,000 clock pulses, 21 million clock pulses a second. So I think you can get pretty good resolution of that. You can get sub-microsecond resolution, which is way too much.
Yeah, but it's still pretty killer.
Yeah.
I love proof of concept stuff like that too,
I mean, it'd be really easy to make it. I just don't have time to make it, I mean, it'd probably take me 2 or 3 days to make that.
I'll add that to your retirement list. I guess I want to talk a little bit about your legacy, because I try my hardest to, all the people that I look up to and think are really giving back and doing work that's important. I try to do my part, but I mean, let's be honest, like this isn't mainstream stuff. Maybe I could get other people to jump on and do it, but some of the things I've been working on is trying to do exhibits in museums. I had one talk to me about doing a Nintendo exhibit with different CRTs. So you got a Super Nintendo with, RF to a crappy TV, composite to an okay one, S-video, RGB, so you could play in real time and see the whole difference. We'll even split the RGB to like a good LCD scaled and a bad LCD so people see the difference. Perfect way to demonstrate lag. Leave the unscaled one on movie mode so you could watch Mario jump a second after everybody else. What type of things do you want people to remember you for your legacy, other than just the products? I mean, the work that came in, the story behind the man, like is that something you even care about?
No, I've never really thought about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, other people have thought of it for you, so unfortunately, whether you like it or not, you're famous, but yeah, it's something that I always wondered, because the work that you've done, no one else has gotten to your level ever, in the gaming world at least. I'm sure there's other brilliant FPGA designers around the world. There's billions of people, but certainly not in the retro gaming scene.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know why no one else has really, done that. I mean, there are other cores and stuff, but nothing ever, really very finished, it seems.
Well, that's a big problem with most anybody who has a hobby, is just being able to finish it. I think most people in my life, all the music that I did, I can't tell you how many bands had an 85% completed album, had a tour booked and didn't go on it. It's the same thing with any hobby that requires effort to finish.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the last 10% takes the 90% of the effort, supposedly.
Yeah. Yeah, and just doing it is a huge thing. That's something that I never understood. Even when people said the words to me, I didn't grasp until I started seeing it. Is all the armchair engineers, barstool racers, whatever you want to call them, like, always talk about doing something, but never even take step one into trying it. So you've clearly hit all the steps for these products.
I see that a lot on like the internet. People ask me about doing things, and they haven't taken the first step. They want to learn how to do FPGAs, but they haven't ever like looked on Google or I don't know how to do that, but we're going to learn about that at the university. We just haven't got there yet. So they're like waiting until they get to a part in the course to learn something. I'm like, it's never gonna happen unless you proactively learn it.
Yeah, and unfortunately too, a lot of people don't understand the what goes behind. So a lot of people can go in and like even for me, it's a dumb example, but I just to relearn WordPress because I haven't used it in years, and I got good at it quickly, and then I needed some of the code changed, and it was just stuck because I didn't know. So I would never say like, oh yeah, I know WordPress now, because I don't. I know how to use the GUI. So I think a lot of people think, oh, FPGA, I know I used to program Visual Basic. Like maybe I could just learn this new GUI and try to put stuff in there, and it's a lot more to it than that.
Well, the hard thing is it's not programming. It looks like programming. You type it into a text editor. It looks kind of like code, but it isn't.
What would you describe it as then?
It's a schematic that you enter in text form.
That's right, because it's not running a program; it's mimicking the actions of the chip.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're writing a schematic in a text file.
That's pretty crazy to think of it that way.
Well, you give all the signals names, and then you say, well, this signal's ANDed with that signal, so that's like an AND gate.
What about people that want to get started into FPGA that are not the groups that I just talked about? The people that understand there's going to be a challenge and you have to learn a new skill from scratch. Is there a good way to dip your toe in the water?
I have no idea. People always ask me this question. I can't answer it. I don't know. I've been doing it a long time. Other than just get something and just start playing with it. That's how I learned.
Yeah, I would assume that you get the cheapest FPGA kit you could find as a kit on eBay or Amazon.
No, that's not really a good idea.
Really?
No. You want something that everybody's using. I think like a DE0 Nano or something.
Okay, so you do at least know a little bit towards the first step.
Well,
then.
There are some good dev boards. You don't want to go on eBay or Amazon and buy the cheapest one because you're not going to have any support. Nobody's going to own that thing but you. If you have problems, the manufacturer is not even going to help you. You don't even know who made it. They're going to probably use old chips. You want something fairly new so the compiler will support it. You download the compiler, it works. One of these fly-by-night dev boards has like a Cyclone 1, 2, or 3 on it. You're going to have to use a compiler from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Makes sense. Do you ever find it hard when you get sucked into your work stuff to like balance? They call it, the new kids are calling it the work-family balance, work-life balance. I don't even know what the kids are calling it. Work-life balance. Is that something that affects you? Because it certainly gets me. I get sucked into a project, and 2 days later, my wife's like, "Have you left the house? At least you showered, but like."
Well, fortunately, I don't have a wife or kids, so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I don't have kids either, so it's not like I'm neglecting children running around looking to be fed or anything like that. But
well, if it's what you do and it's what makes money, that's what you have to do,
Certainly the way I look at it.
If it's a hobby and you're spending all your time on your hobby and neglecting other things, that's one thing. But if this is your livelihood and how you have to put food on the table, well, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, it's absolutely the way I look at it.
That's what I do. I got to work hard if I want to get paid.
As far as your setup goes, because, this is basically about the behind the scenes of the developer here. I see you have a fancy scope that I do not know.
No, that's like a really old scope.
That's an old Hewlett-Packard?
Yeah. They changed their name twice since then.
That's pretty funny. But obviously it's got the bandwidth to support all the different things that you're using on it. So it's still, at one point, it was a very high-end scope. To be able to
at one point. That was a $20,000 scope, probably.
Whoa.
Well, you can buy that on eBay for like $300.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with the Rigel that I use, but at the same time, I mostly don't know what I'm doing. I just follow other people's instructions.
I don't like Rigels. They're kind of a piece of crap. They're okay. I guess I can't say that.
No, for somebody who's working at your level, I understand that. For beginners, they seem fine.
Well, I can explain why I say that. For a lot of people, it's probably fine. We have one at work, and I use it. Mm-hmm. But if you ever use something like this, and then you go to the Rigel, it's kind of like it sucks.
It's just the ease of use?
That and the speed it updates. That thing, even though it's old, that updates 20 or 30 times a second. So it's like using an analog scope, but it's not.
Oh, okay.
So the Rygals, they update, 10 times a second maybe. I mean, the really, really new ones are actually a lot better than that. I'm thinking of the Rygal of like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, 1054 is the one that I have. So it's probably 4 or 5. It's brand new, but it was probably a model from 4 years ago or something.
I don't know if they've improved it since then, incrementally, even though it's the same model, it's like got new software and stuff.
So what are the tools that you depend on then? Obviously, you would have to need the scope. I'm assuming you'd need that RGB monitor. You can't have the composite S-video and RGB signals component too.
Yeah, well, my setup is pretty comical. I mean, as you see, there's not really a lot to the setup.
No, I mean, it's basic. You got soldering iron, you got, I'm assuming everybody... Do you even use a multimeter, or do you do everything?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, I'd be screwed without a multimeter.
Because to be honest, for a lot of the measurements I take now, I've been just training myself to work on the scope. So other than toning stuff out,
Yeah.
Is that...
Fluke 79.
Oh, okay.
And it's only like 25 years old.
I mean, this might sound like a really dumb beginner question, but what do you use the scope for? Obviously testing for tone and basic voltages, but what past that?
Timing.
Oh, yeah.
Digital logic, analog things. Like I was checking video signals on there, audio.
Why would you check video signals on that versus a scope?
Well, I gotta see what
a naive question, I know.
I gotta see what the voltage levels are, to see if it's, compliant with the standard or not. That's the thing, a lot of people make these like fly-by-night, like AV mods, like, for their 2600 or whatever. They're like, well, the picture's really dark, or, oh, the picture's really bright. But, they make this mod, and, if they sell it, it may work on their TV, but it doesn't work on the next person's monitor, or it's way too bright or dark, and that's because the voltage level isn't right. But they don't have any way to know this. So if you look at it on the scope, then you can say, oh yeah, well that's, the proper, 1 volt here and all that.
Yeah, I guess my question is, in what scenario would you, Kevtris, use a multimeter instead of the scope for other than the obvious basic voltage, like
voltage measurements and frequency sometimes, and resistance and ohming things out. I use that a lot. Yeah,
that's the main thing I use my multimeter for, is that, and basic voltages, things like just power lines, not any of the video stuff. But yeah, I'm starting to learn more and more about the different tools that I need to, I don't want to say master, because I don't think I ever will, but at least become very comfortable with in order to continue to play in the space here.
Wouldn't that be mastering it?
I can't say that when I know people like you and Steve and Zach, who are definitely masters at the craft. I think I'm just a tag along trying to do my best, but I'm all right with that. So.
Well, the other thing that scope does, it's also a logic analyzer too.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know how to begin to use it like that. Is it?
Oh, it's got this cable on it. We can probably show B-roll of this.
Oh, wow. And you can just put each in a...
Yeah, you got 16 channels. So what I was doing on this, I hooked this up to the Super NT, the PPU bus, and I could actually watch the signals as I wrote things to it. You can actually get the timing and stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. So essentially, that's a 16-channel scope?
It's like for digital. And you can do the analog at the same time.
That's going to come in handy.
So I could do things like check the lag, like when a register is written to, and see how long it takes for it to come out of the video pin. I did that.
That is cool. So one of the things that actually Smoke Monster had demonstrated a few weeks ago in a video was I don't want to use the word lag because people are mistakenly saying that, but the time that it takes from a button push to action on screen for certain games. And he showed some games that are 1 frame, some games like Mortal Kombat 2 takes 2 or 3 frames depending on the move and the character, which cracked me up, by the way. I didn't realize that game was so... That's the proper way to say laggy, because that's programmed in. Is that the same findings that you found when you were testing Super Nintendo?
Well, it depends on how the game's programmed. When they usually read the controllers once a frame. So when you press the button, there can be up to 1 frame of lag, depending on when you press it to when it's read. If it's only read 1 time a frame, if you press it right after it's read, you got to wait the whole frame until it's read again. So you'll see, oh, I got 1 frame of lag, and you press it again. Oh, I didn't have any lag that time,
So that's really just inherent, or that's random. That's not something that.
No, it's depending on how the game's programmed. But yeah, you have up to 1 frame of lag implicit from the way it's read.
Mm-hmm.
Most games read it once per frame. Some games may read it more, but it's very, very rare. It's usually once a frame.
Is it possible? It is possible for a Super Nintendo game to read more than once a frame?
Of course, you can read it as often as you want.
Is it true that some Atari 2600 games read with every scan line?
Oh yeah, they'd have to. Like for paddle games, it's gotta.
Oh, that's right, for paddle, huh? Because I do remember a couple of 2600 games over the years, or maybe it was more on the Coleco side, where from the time you pressed that button, there was a delay from when the character moved. And I always assumed that was just the way it was programmed in.
Yeah, that was probably the way it was programmed in. Like on some games, like for example, they may, if you like playing Super Mario, let's say, I can't remember exactly how it works, but some games, they'll update the player every other frame, and enemies are the other frame. So it's like enemy, player, enemy, player, enemy, player.
That's interesting.
Because it takes a bunch of processing time. There's only a finite time, resource available. So they'll multiplex. Okay, this frame we're going to work on these enemies. The next frame we'll work on other enemies, and maybe the player. It's up to how it was programmed. So there's some games that'll always have lag, but it's just because it's in the way it's programmed, and there's nothing you can do to fix that because it's just in the game itself.
So for games with driving wheels, then, or any other paddle controller on any other system, do you know of any systems, or have you worked with any that is limited to once a frame, which kind of would make driving controllers or paddles a little more?
I don't know. Well, I mean, only once a frame is probably good enough for any type of game like that, 'cause that's 60 times a second. You'd be hard-pressed to notice that kind of lag.
That is true. Yeah, good point. Well,
I personally don't notice lag until it gets to about 2 or 3 or 4 frames.
That's actually exactly what I was just about to ask you. I think I can tell at about 2, especially if it's something like display lag that could be variable. That's when it gets me, because if it's exactly 2 frames of lag, I probably wouldn't notice.
You can compensate, yeah.
But when it's 1.5, 2 1/4, 2 1.5, that messes with me pretty bad. There are some games that, even like the one that really hit me was, I think it was Oracle of Seasons for Game Boy Color. One of the mini games where you had to it was almost, I think it was the archery one or something. I could not play that on a Retron 5. Don't throw up. A Retron 5 into a flat screen. And then I went and put it through just a tube TV, and I did it the first time.
I was going to mention the Retron 5. Jason brought one of those over, and I was playing Boulder Dash on the NES. There was at least 6 or 7 frames of lag. It was terrible. How can you play games like this? I played some other games, and they were just garbage. It's like, how can you play this on this system,
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I think that was, the Retron 5 was when I really grasped the difference and how important it was. And it was actually Artemio who mailed me, as soon as he found out what I was doing, he mailed me a Genesis cart, which I thought was really awesome, with his 240 suite on there, so I could just fire away and start testing. And yeah, wow, that was pretty disappointing on the Retron 5.
How much lag did you see?
Total display lag, including the 2 that my TV added. There were some tests ended in 7.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
Not all cores, not all cartridges.
That's a tenth of a second. That's a long time.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's pretty crazy. But
yeah, I mean, I was playing the NES on there. On Boulder Dash. I play that. I'm pretty good at that. I played that a lot, and I couldn't play it because I'd move the controller. Like you move the controller back and forth, and the player would be like the opposite of. Like you went left, he would go right, and vice versa because there was so much lag in it. Yeah, that was terrible. I don't know how people could play that.
Neither do I. It was funny because I think I saw Jimmy Fallon or one of the nighttime TV people had Mike Tyson on to play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Just for fun.
And were they using one of those?
They were using a Retron 5, and all I could think of was, even if he was a master at this game, there's no way you could play it and beat it in that thing. So
that's funny.
Well, before I go, I guess the last question is there anything that you'd like to work on that you're allowed to talk about? Is there some kind of cool project that put on your bucket list that you want to see at some point? Things to keep your fans hoping and guessing in the next couple of years or something?
The only thing I'm thinking about working on is my music synthesizer. Chiptune, all-encompassing chiptune synthesizer.
So that's something a musician could actually use live.
Yeah,
while
it'd
they're
have
playing.
MIDI in and knobs and lights and things like that.
That's pretty awesome. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever written your own music through that, or do you just?
No. I mean, I've tried, I've done a few things, but I don't have time to learn it all. You know, it's work on electronic stuff or do music stuff, or, you know, I got a million other things, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you again for first of all, for always being nice to me, because you were my first interview when people weren't even returning my emails and like, whatever, dude, come back when you have more followers. But you were like, nah, sure, I'll do an interview. So thank you for always being nice to me, and thank you for all the great work that you do for the community, because trust me when I tell you, everyone appreciates it.
Well, that's good.
Cool. Thanks again, Kev.